This podcast is intended to provide information for educational purposes only and to serve as a starting point for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. Nothing stated on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Consult with your physician before undertaking or changing any treatment plan.
Welcome back to the Pound of Cure Weight Loss podcast. Happy Monday. Hope you guys are doing great this morning or whenever it is that you're listening to the podcast. How are you today, Dr. Weiner?
I'm doing good. It's Friday afternoon. We always record the podcast on Friday afternoons, usually the last thing I do before we leave. So, I'm good. I'm ready for the weekend. It's my last weekend with both of my children living at home.
Oh.
My youngest daughter is going to college on Friday, a week from today.
Wow.
And I'm an empty nester in 1 week, which is kind of blowing my mind. I felt like my kids were born like 6 months ago.
Do you guys have any fun special plans for this weekend all together?
You know, we do, but it's crazy because it's all packing and preparing. There's just so much to get 2 kids ready for camp. That's what we used to do. Ready for camp. Now it's college. Getting 2 kids ready for college is a lot of work. There's a lot of more of that stuff is kind of gonna occupy most of the weekend. But yeah, it is. This is it, man. Countdown.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I'm sure it'll be an adjustment, but you've done a good job, so they're ready.
So far, it's kind of the goals, right? You want my wife, when my youngest turned 18, my wife and I like high-fived each other, like, hey, no teen pregnancies, no, arrests or drug addiction, both going to college. Like, we did something right.
We did all right. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, for our podcast today, we actually have all of our questions. It's a user or a listener Q&A, and all of our questions today actually are coming from our videos over on YouTube. So if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, know that if you want, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube. So that's actually where we are getting the questions today.
Fantastic. We have good questions.
We've got a lot of good questions, a lot of good conversation. So let's jump right in. Our first question is about how to set a goal weight. So it's a long question. I'm not going to read all of it, but ultimately asking about should there be a range? How important is body composition versus body weight? What about measurements like waist circumference? What about sex, height, age, etc.? And so she gave a little bit of background, and because it can feel confusing, right? Like maybe I hear a lot of people compare, like, oh, well, this is what I weighed in high school. She gives some context around her body composition and measurements, but ultimately, what I like to think about with patients through this is, especially if they're stuck on BMI, right? Because here's the thing, a lot of things in the medical field, and if we're thinking about the weight loss space specifically, it's based on BMI, which in my opinion is garbage. And we've talked about this before, because if we think about BMI, your body mass index, it's just a ratio of height to weight. So body composition and muscle mass versus fat mass has nothing to do with it. And you can actually look at a lot of competitive bodybuilders, for example, or maybe sometimes in the obese range because of their weight to height ratio. So if you find yourself getting kind of trapped in that spiral of chasing a BMI, cut yourself a break and let's use some more valuable metrics. So in terms of a specific weight, goal weight, I do get this question a lot. And Dr. Weiner, I know that you have a process with new patients that I definitely want to ask about in a minute. But I really actually try to have patients step away from a specific number. And it's fine to have a number in their head, but I always like to ask the question, if you were to be, let's say, looking at yourself in the mirror and happy with your body composition, you feel maybe toned, or you feel it fitting in your clothes better, or you're feeling really powerful and strong in the gym, or whatever those other non-scale victories might be for them, and really kind of putting it back on that body composition, would you care more about feeling confident in your body or seeing a specific number on the scale? And to date, There has only been one person who said, "Well, I just want to see a number," and I'm like, "Okay, well, that." But everybody else can understand that it's more important your body composition, that fat mass versus muscle mass. And if we can see that go down, another really great example is I have people coming to me a lot actually complaining of, or at least feeling frustrated that, oh, I only lost 1 pound this month, or maybe they didn't lose any weight at all for the whole month. And then we get to talking, I start digging, asking some more questions, and then come to find out they've like lost 2 inches off their waist, and they are fitting in their clothes better. And I really try to emphasize that with them of, here we can see your body is changing, right? If your weight is the same, but your inches is going down, your body is taking up less space, but your weight is the same, so potentially you're building muscle, losing body fat. To me, I get more excited about that than seeing a specific number on the scale.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great how you feel. I hear a lot of times people will talk about clothing size. I really like that too. There's a lot bigger range. But you're right. I mean, there's so much more to it than that number on the scale. And, especially also what I see all the time is that, the wonderland, and everybody wants
Mm-hmm.
to get under 200 pounds. And I always try to remind people like, hey, listen, we somehow came up with a base 10 numeric system, which meant 100 is different. And that was a decision based on how many fingers we have most likely. And then at some point, somebody decided what a pound was. I think it had something to do with silver. I'm not sure exactly. But we decided on a pound, and the rest of the world uses kilograms, but we use pounds. And so all of those things are really baked into this 200-pound mark. And that there's so much randomness that really has no impact on your life that we can't just look at that number because it's numerically neat.
Mm-hmm.
Process that I go through with every patient in the office, and we do this at the first visit typically, is it's not about your goal weight, it's about your expected weight loss. And it really is about matching what therapies and treatments you're comfortable with and what the expected weight loss is from those treatments. And we've talked, ad nauseum about our plan, which is nutrition, medications, and surgery, and kind of not which of the three are we going to choose, but how are we going to use all three of these together the most strategic fashion to get you to the number that you like, get you to the body composition where you feel best. And that's a challenge. And so we always start with nutrition. If you lose 10% of your body weight through nutrition, that is amazing. That is a really hard thing to do. Most people can't do that. If you've accomplished that, that is unbelievable. So if you say, listen, I'm not into meds, I'm not into surgery, and you weigh 300 pounds, I'd say if you lost 30 pounds, that would be amazing. That would be a huge change in your health. Lower your blood pressure, lower your blood glucose. There'd be a lot of benefit. Now, 270 is still a very high weight, and I would talk to that patient about medications and surgery, but that would be my goal weight if someone wanted to use nutrition only. If we want to use meds, depending on what med and whether they have access to the higher doses or not, we're generally looking at around 15 to 20% total body weight loss. So again, you're 300 pounds, we're looking at 45 to 60 pounds. And so my goal weight for that person is probably 250-ish. That's what we would expect to see with the medications alone and good nutrition. Sometimes we see more, sometimes we see less, but that's my goal weight for that patient is 250. It's not about a judgment about what you should weigh. It's about setting expectations properly. And
Realistic
yeah,
expectations.
realistically. And because obesity is a metabolic disease and we're really using physiologic and metabolic treatments, that we should just look at the science and this is how much weight we expect, and that's the right weight for you. And if that's where you want to stop is with medications, then this is how much weight we think you're going to lose. And then if it was surgery, it's I have a calculator. Our calculator is available on our website if you want to use it, and you can plug in your info and it'll send you what your expected weight loss is with sleeve and gastric bypass. And so I plug both those numbers in and show them the numbers, and we use that as part of the surgical decision making process. And then on top of it, I kind of Well, if you had a sleeve and had the medications, then we might be here. And we don't have a calculator for that. At some point we will, but we don't have a calculator for that, but it generally is kind of combining the two techniques. And
I was just going to ask, do you get to stack the percentages? So 10% from nutrition plus,
yeah,
15% from meds plus however many percentages, or from your new starting weight, if they come now at 270 after that
yeah.
10% from nutrition, how would you help them like stack?
So what's the math? That's where you're getting at, right? Because Zoe's going to make her spreadsheet so that she can plug all her numbers in, right? So first of all, nutrition doesn't count in the bariatric surgery calculation. So a lot of people will say, well, oh, you have me losing 80 pounds with bariatric surgery. If I do really great with nutrition, will I lose more weight? And the answer is no, because those numbers come from expected weight loss that's studied over time. And so that really looks at all bariatric surgery patients who eat very well after surgery. People think, well, oh, well, I'm going to be the one who eats really well. No, you would be the one who doesn't eat really well, because almost everybody else is eating really well after surgery, at least in our practice. Now, a couple of years out, things can drift back, and that's a different story. And that's part of the reason why we do these podcasts, is to bring people back in after surgery. But nutrition doesn't get factored in, but the meds do. And so, but you have to first subtract the weight loss. So let's say you're 300 and we think you're going to lose 100 pounds from surgery. Now your new weight is 200. We take the 15 to 20% off the 200, not off the 300. So it's not off your starting weight, it's off your post-bariatric surgery weight. And I usually maybe round it up a little bit, because it's not quite that clean, but meds tend to stack on top of surgery. There's not as much overlap as I thought there would be. And so what that allows us to do is kind of map out a treatment plan on average for every patient. And if we choose these treatments, we can expect this weight loss, which is the way I think about it. A lot of people think about it more as like, what should I weigh? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not what should you weigh. It's what's going to happen if I change my eating, and if I have the surgery, if I have the medications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very nuanced, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations. And like you said, the calculator, if anybody here listening wants to calculate their own predicted weight loss, definitely go check out that calculator and see what your numbers come out as.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, ready for the next question?
Let's go. Next question.
All right. Next question is about sugar cravings. So again, there's kind of a lot here to get through, but ultimately the question is about these horrible sugar cravings that this person has been having for the past month. And she's actually increased the amount of vegetables, and fiber is currently around 20 to 25 grams. I love that.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot.
protein over 100 grams daily. And I didn't expect this to happen. And when I read this, I was like, yes. But increasing my vegetable and protein intake has completely taken my sugar cravings away. Can you explain if it's the protein or the fiber causing it?
What do you think, Zoe?
Yeah, I don't know if I could necessarily say it's one or the other. I think it's a combination of both. I like to think about the fiber for the filling, the voluminous piece of it. It fills you up. You can eat till you feel full. And the protein helps satisfies you. So it keeps you full maybe for longer than an hour. So having those two especially together, and that's something I work with patients on, is building their meal formula around protein and fiber so that you get the filling up. You feel full from the fiber, and then you stay full from the protein, and that together is the food combination for reducing food noise from my
Yeah.
perspective.
So let me ask you a question, Zoe. Everybody's counting calories. Everybody's counting carbs, right? What, 50, 100 grams? I don't even know, because we don't really do that in our practice, what the right number is. Nobody counts fiber.
Hmm.
Why is that? Shouldn't we be counting fiber?
Ah, absolutely. Fiber fiber is interesting though too, especially if we're thinking about a lot of the diet products and specifically like keto products. And then there was this whole craze of net carbs, which is total carbohydrates minus your fiber intake. And so that is, and if anybody listening is maybe paying attention to, or that rings a bell, It's a marketing scam. From my perspective, it really is, because it's all about what can these new keto products put on their packages to say zero net carbs or whatever.
Right.
So there's a more processed form of fiber, and you might see some of those low carb tortillas or protein bars have 14, 15 grams of fiber. But guess what? 14 grams of fiber in a low carb tortilla does not do the same thing as 14 grams of fiber from vegetables.
Right. Right. For sure. So it's more complicated than just counting up the fiber in on the nutrition label, because there's a lot of different types of fiber, and yeah.
And they make you feel differently.
Yes.
However, something that you can count that in like is encompassed in that fiber goal, maybe it doesn't tell you the number of grams of fiber, but actually counting your ounces or pounds of vegetables on our app using caloratio, it, using the metabolic reset diet, if you've been listening for a while, you know that you're working towards a pound of vegetables a day, and on the app there's actually that veggie counter. So if you can get yourself to over a pound of vegetables a day, you're going to be good on fiber intake.
Yeah. I would have another thing that I would kind of add on top of why this happened. I would have personally expected this a little bit more if she said she was eating more fruit. But we have this kind of inherent nutrient craving. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before about the little orphans that drank the cod liver oil because they were vitamin D deficient, and they could somehow sense that cod liver oil was rich in vitamin D. And we have this kind of inborn drive for the nutrients that we're missing. And
like
so,
pica and
right,
iron, right?
exactly. And so, the human body is very good at that. Any mammal body is good at that. And probably insects too, and reptiles have that ability as well. And so we're able to sense the nutrients we're deficient at. And that kind of, in my mind, is the origin of our food cravings, particularly when they're processed. And so it very well may be, but by eating this person was deficient in some of these phytonutrients, and it was manifesting themselves. Maybe something in cherries made them like some, cherry lifesavers, or and so
Mm.
the artificial flavors kind of would they drove this craving, and when they ate artificial flavored cherry, they don't get the nutrients, so you just keep eating and eating and eating. And so it's when you satisfy those phytonutrient deficiencies, then you don't have these strong cravings anymore. And so I think if you're really craving something, then you got to look at that vegetable intake, you got to look at the fruit intake, and make sure you're getting those really valuable compounds that are necessary for our body to function well. So I think that might also be a part of why those cravings improved. So, but it's a
Hmm.
great question. I love that this person had that experience. And I think if you're struggling with food cravings, more vegetables, more fruit, nuts, seeds, beans, it helps. It
It's not
works.
about it's not about focusing on restricting the sugar. It's about focusing on adding more of the
Right.
good stuff.
Right.
The more you focus on restricting the sugar, the more you want it. So just
Yeah.
naturally crowd it out by filling your diet with those whole foods, fiber rich, healthy proteins,
Yeah.
etc.
And again, that's really why we embrace this idea of caloratio. Caloratio is the only food logging system that I know of where you can increase your score by eating more. Everything else is about restriction and not eating. But if you add more broccoli to your diet, you will score higher on our caloratio system. And so that's something we really want people to embrace, is the idea that eating healthy foods is good and you should do as much of it as you can. And it's a very different mindset from cutting carbs or calories.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, in we just added a new support group to our schedule that is actually found within the app, but it's free for everybody, even if you don't have a membership. But this is our intro to the app. So I was teaching people, walking through how to use Caloratio and putting in the example of, okay, here's our breakfast. It was really nutritious, got 100% Caloratio score. Then we went out for lunch and we had pizza and we saw that score drop down. And then we went through how can we bring that score back up with dinner. And that feeds into my philosophy that I work with patients on too, which is always follow your fun food with a fuel food. So
Yeah.
making sure that you're adding in those nutrient dense healthy foods after you do choose to maybe indulge in a treat so it doesn't turn into a snowball. And Caloratio is a great practical application example of how to do that.
Love it. Okay. What's our next question?
All right, next question says my insurance doesn't cover GLP-1s unless I have diabetes. My doctor says it will help me, but my insurance says no. What now? I have 35 pounds of regain to lose after a broken leg.
Yeah. So first of all, I love that the person acknowledges that this was an injury. We talk about that all the time. Injury is a cause of weight gain. It's on our intake questionnaire. I talk to patients all the time about it. And so, weight regain after bariatric surgery, in my mind, theoretically, if our healthcare system functions somewhat normally, would be of historical note only because weight regain is incredibly treatable with GLP-1s.
Mm,
And it really has made, first everyone's like, oh, bariatric surgery, no, that's going to be replaced by the meds. And we're seeing now that it's not going to replace anything. It's really going to augment it. And the weight regain and some of the issues we've had with bariatric surgery over the years is now really, it's a non-issue. The issue is now, how do you get the meds? And that's what this
yeah.
person's asking. And really that's what our platinum program does. We have techniques. My general rule is for $250 a month, we can set you up. And that's everything. That's the meds and us. You pay for it separately, but the way it works out and the way we kind of handle it, and we've really operationalized this whole thing to, and we use real medications, and we just know about all the deals and different techniques, our creative dosing strategies as we call them. So and I try to work with patients because, people, when you've regained 35 pounds, you feel like the world is closing in on you. And there's so much anxiety and stress and worry and, oh my God, am I going to gain all of it back? And this is so terrible. What am I going to do? And I'm going to be another failure. So, and it keeps you up at night and it spirals in your brain and it just takes over your whole happiness. And
Mm,
so when I work with patients, what I try to do, and it can potentially be a little bit less than that, truthfully, but I try to say, okay, you don't have an unsolvable problem. You have a $250 a month problem. And I'm not saying $250 a month is nothing, but it's not, the world is not caving in on you over $250 a month for the overwhelming majority of people. And
mhm.
so now it's like, well, maybe I could do Uber Eats and deliver food or Instacart and shop for groceries. And if I did that for 2 days a month, I would have $250. And so we have people truly getting a side gig, and it's kind of crazy and stupid, but it beats that worry and stress. And so that really is the problem that you have if you're struggling
Mhm.
with regain after bariatric surgery for the overwhelming majority. It's not 100%, but about 90 to 95% of weight regain is very treatable with these meds. So
Mhm.
that's how I would approach this. If you don't have insurance coverage, we're not convincing them of anything. It's never going to change. And so it's now about figuring out the cheapest way to get it. And also there's a whole big move for these peptides. Everybody's talking about peptides. That's it's sketchier than compounding. Be very wary of that. People are taking rotrutatide. I would really warn you against taking rotrutatide. It is not FDA approved. I have concerns about the safety of that medication. My thought is it may increase cardiovascular events. And these are things we do not know the answers to because the studies have not been done, and you should not be taking them. You're a guinea pig, and it's not worth it. There's other solutions out there that are proven and safe.
Yeah. And we'll link in the description of the podcast to the page to learn more about the Platinum program. And this
Yeah.
is for anybody in the country.
Yeah, you can actually sign up through the app now.
Even better.
Yeah.
Download the app and then sign up
Download
for
the
the
app and you
platinum
can sign up
program.
for platinum through that.
Yep.
So
Another question here we have again from YouTube. What is your advice for people who feel hungry almost all the time with or without bariatric surgery? So, for a little bit of context, this person had the sleeve about 3.5 years ago, and her hunger never fully went away. And so it feels like, maybe for the past 6 months that she's been absolutely ravenous and waking up in the middle of the night starving, and again, waking up in the morning starving.
yeah. Well, I mean, my answer is easy. I think let's focus most of our time on your answer because I think my answer is if you've had a sleeve, you need meds. And that's really,
Yep.
I'd say that's probably 90% a true statement. And I, the answer to durable, sustainable weight loss and weight maintenance and hunger and appetite control is a sleeve and meds. It is rarely a sleeve alone. That's the truth, unfortunately. I don't think that that's being discussed as often as it should be. We discuss it all the time. Sleeve and meds is a great combo. I love it. It works fantastic, but it's the two together that work. But what are we doing from a nutritional perspective?
Nutritional perspective, I always like to say if you're feeling hungry, I want you to eat more food.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Of course, it's what we're eating more of. And if we think about this timeline, right? Sleeve about 3.5 years ago, but she mentioned, I can't remember if I read this part or not, but for the first 3 years could feel satisfied on relatively small amounts. But guess what? That hunger suppression, that decreased food noise, that most people experience after they have bariatric surgery, which is the whole point, it's not doesn't last forever. And of course, Dr. Weiner, that's where the meds come in. However, going into it with that expectation of if I'm relying on this surgery to completely wipe away my hunger for forever, you're setting yourself up for failure
Yeah,
ultimately. So
absolutely.
as the honeymoon period gets farther away from you, and as you feel more hungry, and as you're able to eat more food. But of course, like I said, it's about what we're eating more of. So like we talked about in another question, add more fiber, add more vegetables, add more fruit, maybe depending on where your protein's at, 3.5 years out, I'm not exactly sure, but potentially if you're still relying on primarily protein shakes, can we swap that out for more whole food protein sources? And really looking at the quality and the volume of your food, maybe getting out of that I was only eating this much before and I should, and there's that shoulding on yourself. I should only be eating this amount. And that's just not, that's again, just like some made up rule.
Right. Yeah. And we talk a lot about the portion control trap too, which is that
Yep.
the surgery is going to take care of portions for me, and it really doesn't over the long run. And so that's where the quality of your diet and the type of food. But I love that statement. It's so beautiful in its simplicity, which is if you are hungry, eat more food. And that really is the essence of the advice that I think you need when you're in this situation. But it's just about what you eat. So
Because if you continue to just try to willpower your way through eating the same small amount you had before, that's when your metabolic thermostat and your set point starts to fight against you, because then that's going back to that old broken system of eating less
yeah,
to lose weight.
right.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. All right. What's our
Yep.
last question?
All right, last question here. I feel like ultra processed foods, this isn't going to be interesting. Okay, I'll start over. I feel like ultra processed foods are much better at quieting the hunger than whole foods. There is no way I would feel satisfied from eating some celery with peanut butter for breakfast. What is your advice for people like me?
It's a tough one. What do you think about that?
This, when I was putting together the questions for today's episode, and I saw this question, and actually just yesterday, I had a one-on-one with somebody who had a similar experience. She's like, I've been wanting to move away from processed foods for many years, and this is the first time I've actually been able to do it, but I'm feeling more hungry and more cravings. And to be honest, I was a little surprised by that. So now seeing that there's another person having this experience, it is interesting, and it's definitely worth having the conversation. You know, what we worked on with this patient that I had the one-on-one with yesterday was she is on the GLP-1s and she was trying to have these 3 square meals a day. And she was feeling like she was force feeding herself past the point of fullness because she was trying to get that pound of vegetables in, like the great pound of cure student she is. And I was like, okay, yeah, I want you to eat until you feel full, but I do not want you to force feed yourself past the point of fullness to be uncomfortable. So we've actually shifted down to let's try eating on a schedule every couple hours, still getting that protein and fiber in, and see how that changes. Being more mindful actually and more present with that eating experience. I think a part of it too is she was so wrapped around the axle about this happening and she was really stressed out, and I think that can be a big piece of it too, is like having this like anxiety around it. It's not working
Yeah.
can make it's what you're hyper fixating on, right?
I think to some degree also, it, you know, let me change this around a little bit different. I think the answer will become apparent. Is um, I I used to I find that feeling that smoking cigarettes is much more relaxing to me than meditating, and so I'm going to continue to smoke. And I think it's very easy to see that there's really an underlying addiction to nicotine that's driving that statement. And so I think that if that's really how you're feeling, then there's probably some degree of food addiction to these ultra processed foods, to the sugar and spike you have when you eat processed carbohydrates or sugary foods, to the
The
artificial
dopamine.
sweeteners, to the dopamine, the pleasure from the fatty and sugary foods. And so I think that the way I interpret this is a food addiction. And so we
Mm.
really kind of almost need to look at it that way. And part of it is just like, well, that person who can only relax when they smoke cigarettes, they ultimately will be able to relax without cigarettes after a period of time passes and that addiction wanes. And so I think that this really should be addressed for what it is. I don't use Contrave and Topamax very much, which are kind of these first generation medications. It might be worth a try in someone like this. GLP-1s can also kind of help you get through that a little bit. And so I think we have to look at this as an addiction, rather than actual satiety.
Mm. And also just to be clear, peanut butter and celery would not be enough for me for breakfast either. So maybe trying
Yeah.
to augment what it is that you're eating and maybe having something like eggs with a veggie egg scramble and maybe some
Yeah.
celery with peanut butter or a apple with peanut butter. So you're getting that volume, you're getting all of your nutrients in, and you're setting yourself up for success for that day. Because if you're just trying to eat celery with peanut butter, I know that, and maybe it's brought up because you had mentioned that sometimes you have that, and that's great.
Yeah.
But also recognizing, like, knowing you're meeting yourself where you're at, and knowing what helps you feel your best going into the day might
Yeah.
just mean we need to boost up that volume for breakfast a bit.
Yeah. Some people are breakfast eaters and some people are not, you know?
Yeah.
And it sounds like this person's probably a breakfast eater, in which case, big veggie scramble, something along those lines. Maybe eat a large meal, put some more animal protein in it, which tends to be a little more filling. Um, and so, yeah.
I'll tell you what, I had the other morning for breakfast. I love having shredded carrots in my eggs.
Hmm.
I don't. It's kind of weird, I know, but I had like not even a cup of shredded carrots, a cup of spinach, cooked that together, added egg whites, seasoned it. Had that nice big plate, and then I had a banana and peanut butter. I'll tell you, I should have stopped, but I had gone for a run earlier, so I was hungry. Yada yada. I was so full off of this plate of veggies and eggs and my banana peanut
Yeah.
butter. So, maybe you just got to try a couple different things until you find something that works well and satisfies you in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Great questions. Really good questions.
Well, keep them coming. We are here to answer your questions. If this feels relevant to anybody in your life, please share it with them. We are trying to get the word out, of course, and help as many people as we can get to the root of their long lasting, healthy, happy weight loss, doing it in a way that is not keeping you starving.
That's right. Absolutely. All right, we'll see you guys next time.